Hey everybody, today Rahdo runs through his top 10 video games of all time, which is going to be kind of cool and unusual for me because normally my videos are focused on board games, including lots of top 10 board game countdowns, but today I am going to dig deep into my past and think over the last 40 years or so of video game playing that I've been doing ever since the 70s when I was a little kid and I first discovered Pong and played it with my dad. And I'm going to be trying to provide you not necessarily the 10 best games, because that would be insane, the height of hubris. What I'm going to be talking about is the 10 games that I've enjoyed the most, that have given me the most pleasure over the last 40 years. And I can't wait to talk about it, although I got a couple of quick caveats. One, none of my games will be on this list. For those of you who don't know, I was actually a video game developer for about 20 years. You can look me up on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/in/Richard Ham if you want to see the games I've worked on. And while there's one that would rank very, very high on this list, but I'm not going to list that because I'm really trying to focus on the works of others, not my own stuff. I'm not trying to self-promote here at all. That would just be a bit silly also. But otherwise, the sky's the limit. Another thing to bear in mind, though, really, for the last 3 or 4 years, I have not been playing very many video games. My love of video games has been subsumed by my love of board games, which is really what I focus on Rahdo Runs Through. So you're not going to see a lot of really new stuff. I mean, we're going to be digging deep into the vault. Lots of classics because, well, I'm a bit of a moldy oldie myself. And I think that's enough of the caveats. With that out of the way, let's get started with this countdown, starting at number 10. Let's see if this works. Is it going to work? Yes, it is. Here we go. Need for Speed Most Wanted. And this is a really interesting one for me to put on this list because, in all honesty, I've never really been that much into racing games. Never really, pole position back in the day. I mean, I did play a lot of Knight Rider on my old Atari 2600. Remember that little dial where it was just a bunch of lines coming at you? But since Knight Rider, when I was a little kid, this, Need for Speed Most Wanted, has probably gotten the most play of any racing game I've ever been exposed to. And that's for a few reasons. One, there's a lot of really cool mechanisms in it. I mean, it was like a really nice blending pot of a lot of really cool stuff. The races themselves, in this kind of Fast and the Furious style, illegal street racing simulation this game makes, are really, really good, really solid, very exciting, very blood pumping, as they should be. But I always love the fact that there's a story, a real story with characters and cutscenes and reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing. I always appreciated that. It kind of drew me into the game a little bit more than your average race game. And also, I love the fact that my rocketing up the ranks as I'm trying to become a better and better underground street racer gets interrupted by all these police chases. Every once in a while, you're going to have to stop racing and just try to race for your life. And those sequences are so much fun. Now, of course, Most Wanted didn't introduce that. I think it was Hot Pursuit. The Need for Speed Hot Pursuit games is where these police chases first came in. But they were so escalated in this game and so much fun. Listening to the police radio and knowing that, and overhearing them as they're talking about what their plans are to cut me off and, making, changes in the way I'm going to drive because of that. And the open freedom you have in this gigantic world where you're driving around at 100 plus miles an hour all the time was just very, very satisfying. Another thing that was really, really cool was the bullet time. The fact that you can use bullet time anytime you want to sort of thread the needle between those roadblocks and whatnot was phenomenal. I had a really... for somebody like me who's not really that great at racing games, being able to slow the game down whenever I needed it, it was just really stellar and a great sense of power. And interestingly, it doesn't really upset the flow of the game because it's in your control. It's not bullet time that's happening because, let's show you a really cool moment, although they do those do. It's bullet time because I asked for it. I'm in control. And actually, I think that's going to be a theme you see throughout this entire list. I always gravitate towards games that give me more control as opposed to, the game taking control away from me because I'm old school that way. But it wasn't just the gameplay of this game that really pulled me in. Most Wanted was really, for me, in the right place at the right time because I had kind of started to run out of interest in video games. My enthusiasm for video games was starting to wane, I have to admit. But the launch of the Xbox 360, and Most Wanted was a launch title on Xbox 360, introduced two really cool systems that pulled me back in. One, the obvious one, is achievements. Oh my gosh, achievements are so great. Whoever at Microsoft came up with that idea, I hope it made them rich because I mean, it changed the game. Adding this meta game on top of all the games you play, these kind of high scoreboard things, I mean, was so enticing to me and pulled me in hard. I got super addicted to chasing Chivos. And, I got all 10,000 in this game. I spent so many hours just because I had to ring it all up, because suddenly the games you're playing have meaning beyond the session of the game. They have meaning that leads from game to game to game. Brilliant achievements. Now, of course, they're standard issue, but at the time, truly revolutionary. And then the other thing that I loved in this game especially was custom soundtracks. The fact that the Xbox 360 lets you rip your own CDs and put your music on the hard drive and then use them in games instead of the music that was in the game itself, phenomenal. And Need for Speed Most Wanted did a really great job of it. Okay, he's still driving. Because, as I'm driving along listening to the music I want to hear, not the music that the designers have chosen for me, or, they've gotten licenses for me, that my music that works for me, speaks to me, was amazing. But this game was smart enough to say, oh, when the police chases start and, you have to start listening to the police radios and stuff like that, my music would go down, the action music would come up. So this game, unlike a lot of games, Xbox natively supports letting you put your own music in, but very few games really leveraged it all that much. This one did, and it got me even more hooked into it because I was playing my music while I was playing, and the game was smart enough to work it into the system. Absolutely amazing. My number 10, Need for Speed Most Wanted. Now let's move on to number 9, Uncharted 2. Drake's Fortune, I think is the name of it. Now, this is a really odd one for me to put on. And I actually thought long and hard about including this. I just wasn't sure if I should because, well, like I said right up front, for me, gaming is all about giving control to the player. And Uncharted and its success really kind of heralded a new era in video game design. And by the way, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about AAA console design, because that's really what my background is in. That's what most of the games I've played over the years have been, console games. Back in the day, you looked cool inside the game because you were able to pull off cool moves. Nowadays, you look cool because you just know to hold down a button and the game jumps through all these hoops and does all these things and has all these cool design tricks designed to make you look cool. Whether you're good at the game or not is immaterial now. The cool factor comes from just moving into the right place and pushing a button. Now, of course, this is you can't see it anywhere. It's most noticeable with, the advent of QuickTime events and stuff like that. And I'm not against QuickTime events. I think they're kind of nice. They have their places, nice little things just to mix it up a little bit. But what I'm talking about more is games like this where, if you contrast and compare an Uncharted game with the original Tomb Raider. In the original Tomb Raider, when you jumped out and you grabbed onto a ledge, if you let go of the grab button, you would fall to your death. And so as you were kind of shimming along, over some 500-foot chasm full of spikes or whatnot, you felt the pressure because you were holding that button. I remember holding that button tight, my finger cramping, because if I let go, I would die. And that brings me in and makes me connect with the character, with Laura. In this game, and games of its ilk, your Assassin's Creed, your Batman Arkham Asylums, your Infamouses, all of, kind of modern AAA character-based adventure explore games, cool stuff is going to happen no matter what. You don't have to worry about that. All you got to do is just push forward and watch as your character does really cool, amazing acrobatics as he climbs up a building or does impossible jumps and feats of dexterity and whatnot. And all that happens because the designers have defined it as happening, because they've put in all these invisible walls and magnetic systems so that you'll automatically snap to the right place. So you're in the right place, not based on your skill, but based on the fact that the game is designed to ensure that you will look good doing what you're doing. And don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. It's phenomenal. It makes for amazing cinematic. This is an amazing cinematic adventure, but it does rob you of a lot of, well, at least for me as a gamer, what pulled me into games in the first place. The fact that I feel like I'm connected to the character, like I'm doing it, not like it's been pre-designed to be done, no matter who is playing. So that's a big deal. So with all that in mind, why is Uncharted 2 on my list? Well, because, you know what? If you're going to do it, if you're going to take these kind of cinematic tricks, do it well. And this game does it better than anything. I mean, I tried Uncharted 3, and this is such a leap from Uncharted 1. I haven't tried Uncharted 4 or Last of Us or several of Naughty Dog's other games, but man, this game took everything to an 11. So much so that I was willing to put aside my disdain for the fact that, yeah, so much of this game, I mean, this is the only skill you need in the game. Being able to aim with your with the thumbsticks. That's really about it. Everything else is taken care of for you, and it's a good, solid shooter. Don't get me wrong. But in spite of the fact that I know that the game is doing all of my heavy lifting, and therefore I am kind of divorced from the proceedings that happen on screen, these proceedings are so amazing. So many insanely wonderful cinematic moments happen in this, and they do still let you play within those cinematic moments up to a certain extent. I mean, within certain boundaries, that it worked. That I enjoyed this game immensely from beginning to end, in spite of the fact that I didn't like how it was holding my hand every step of the way. And so, I mean, I got to give props to Uncharted 2 as my number 9 best game or most fun game of all time. Now let's move on to number 8, Robotron. Oh yeah, baby, Robotron. Now, actually, when I first sat down to try and make this list, one of the very first games I thought of was actually Geometry Wars. In part because, again, it was another one of those, launch titles or near launch titles for Xbox 360 that I just really dove into deep because of the achievements. And so Robotron was going to be on my, Geometry Wars, which of course owes everything to Robotron, was going to be on my list. But then I started thinking about it, and I remembered, as much time as I threw into Geometry Wars and Geometry Wars 2, I spent more time running around in these black screens being chased by all these robots trying to save all these people, frantically trying to stay alive. This game, Robotron, or Robotron 2084, at the time was so innovative. Eugene Jarvis also designed Defender and several other classics. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not necessarily a video game historian, even though I've worked in the video game industry for so long, but I believe this is the first instance of dual joystick controls, and it uses it so well. These days, dual joystick controls are just woven into the fabric of pretty much every game out there because we're so used to dual thumbsticks. But at the time, back in the 80s, the early 80s, this was phenomenal. This was so liberating, moving in one direction, shooting in another, and the constant pressure, the nonstop, relentless, in-your-face action, while still giving you other stuff to do. All the special effects that the different types of robots have that are chasing you, trying to keep people alive, and just going. I probably have put more quarters into Robotron machines than any other arcade system of all time. So I had to put it on the list, both for its place in history, but also just for its place in my heart. I enjoyed this so much, and I still enjoy the formula so much to this day, which is why I got so deep into Geometry Wars that I have to give it to number 8, Robotron. Now let's move on to number 7. Let's see here. Super Mario Brothers 64. Oops, I probably should have picked a better spot than this. Oh, what the heck. I'll start talking about while they're playing a little minigame. My gosh, what an amazing game. What a watershed moment for games was Super Mario Brothers 3. When you compare and contrast to what came before, putting aside Super Mario Brothers 2, which is obviously from a different, everybody knows that story, so putting all that aside, this game changed the game. Because of course at the time, 2D side-scrollers were the norm. They were, the height of what video game technology actually offered was just being able to move from left to right, hopping up and down, bopping things on the head, maybe shooting some guns, whatever it might be, depending on what the game is. And this reigned supreme. And actually, I have to say, just as an aside, it is so wonderful and so gratifying to see the resurgence, almost kind of a renaissance of 2D side-scrollers that's going on today with so many wonderful, beautiful, mostly independently developed side-scrolling games, but you know what? They all owe everything to this masterpiece right here, and none of them, from a gameplay perspective, can hold a candle to it. Actually, I have to admit, I thought long and hard about putting Super Mario World instead of Super Mario Brothers 3, mostly because of Yoshi and because it did everything that, but all Super Mario World does everything this game does, just a little bit more, taking it from to an 11 to a 12. But this game took side-scrollers from a 7 to a 10. Or to an 11, if you know what I mean. There's so much in here, so many things that are just now standard parts of the Mario franchise. All the different, the overworld you explore, all the different suits you wear, all that kind of stuff came from here. This game was so game-changing when it came out. But aside from that, aside from its importance just in terms of like the evolution of video game design, what really puts it on the list for me, I mean, I was downloading these videos. Oh, by the way, I should say, thanks to everybody on YouTube that I borrowed these videos from. I just went to YouTube and downloaded some videos, and I'm just going to play them because I didn't want to spend time trying to get out emulators and make video of these myself. I will put a link, by the way, to every one of these videos in the show notes down below. Credit where credit is due for all the video game bloggers, video gameographers who are putting these together, and I just borrowed them to make this video. But anyway, when I was watching this and seeing all the new stuff that appeared in this game, I was taken back. I mean, there's so much variety, so many clever tricks with a very limited toolbox that the designers of this game were able to put in. With the levels, like I remember those tank levels. I still remember those to this day. So much pressure, so much time. I mean, you saw that previous one where the level itself was moving up and down, and you had to deal and respond to it in so many different varieties, so many different worlds for you to explore, and of course all the cool special effects, all the neat new suits. They were not resting on their laurels with this. I mean, this game still holds up today, and can stand side by side with the best of the best. Well, no surprise there, because this is, for my money anyway, the best 2D side-scroller of all time, and that's why it's on my list. Number 7, I believe we're at Super Mario Bros. 3. Now let's move on to number 6. Star Control 2. Oh, Ford and Ricci, probably my 2 favorite video game designers. I mean, they so much goodness has come out of these guys. And I mean, and this is their crowning achievement. I mean, such an amazing game. Every modern, outer space, galactic hopping space opera game owes so much to this. This pioneered so many things. And I know before this there was, what was it called? Starfighter, I think. I forget what the previous one, from EA came, which was a really big deal too. I can't remember the name of it though. But this game does so much. I mean, so much variety with all the different aliens you run into. The music is amazing. The epic story that just goes on, is so deep and so rich. And it's so smart the way they pull you into this world. Because you've been out of touch with the galaxy for whatever it was, 20 years, and you're finally going back out there and you have to learn. I mean, just brilliant, smart decisions every step of the way. So many cool, interesting aliens that you involve yourself with, you make your treaties with, and then pulling it all together, this phenomenal, absolutely amazing 2D ship-to-ship combat system. Whenever you have to fight, this is not a game where, unlike most RPGs, I'll just choose to strike, super strike, or heal. And the Final Fantasy, which is, I've never really been able to get into those very much. Spoiler, there will be no JRPGs on this list. This game, again, when you have to do combat, you're doing combat. You're pulled in, and there's so much variety in the combat. All the different types of ships with all their strengths and weaknesses. They all play off each other so well. It's a masterpiece. This is a monument to game design. It just does not get any better than Star Control 2, which is my number 6. And now, let's move on to number 5. The Adventures of Cookie and Cream. Now, this is on the list because it represents all the many, many cooperative games that I'm always looking for. When Jen and I were playing video games, we were always looking for something that we could do working together instead of working against each other, and none of them touched Cookies and Cream. Of all the co-op video games I've played, maybe these days, maybe there's more. Like, there's that Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. That really excites me. I mean, that's almost enough to pull me back into video games. But this game, it's so simple. There's just 2 halves of the screen. Your half and my half. We're both moving forward. It's effectively a 2D platformer. It's faux 3D, kind of like the original Crash Bandicoots. But as I move forward on my track, I will run into obstacles that you have to overcome on your track. And often in the process of you overcoming those obstacles on your track, then that means I've got to do something to help you forward. And that's the entire thing throughout this game. You're constantly, okay, take a few steps forward. I got to deal with something. I've got to fight some monsters. I got to do something. While meanwhile, you're doing something over there that's going to open a door for me or make a bridge cross, and then I'll be able to do something for you. And it's just this constant, I move forward, you move forward, I move forward, you move forward. But players are so interlocked every step of the way. Everything I do affects you and vice versa. It's just brilliant. It's so simple and so pure and clean and elegant, and we had so much fun playing it. And actually, the coolest parts of the game, to be honest, were those times when the 2 separate sides disappeared And both players are in the same place. And those are things normally when we have to get into some kind of vehicle and ride it around. And each player has to control one half of that vehicle. I mean, still to this day, I mean, the simple joy of me and Jen sitting on the couch playing, I'm a rowboat, and I'm stroking on one side, and she's stroking on the other, and we have to stroke in unison. Brilliant, lovely, simple stuff. Where again, it's all about you feeling like you're touching all the stuff in the world. This is not a game full of cutscenes and QuickTime events and magnetic attractors and all that. This is a game where second by second, my input on the controls directly reaches in and touches the world. And the world reaches back and pushes on me. It's just wonderful. It's a wonderful achievement. Cookies and Cream 2 was, it did not recapture the magic, I'm afraid. And I haven't ever seen anything else that does. I'm sure by now, because gosh, this is what, 15 years ago, something like that? I'm sure by now somebody else must have cracked this nut because it's so simple. This game was so elegant and pure, and Jen and I had so much fun playing it. We played it, we finished it several times, which is something we very rarely did. We loved it so much. It was just a great way to spend, a Sunday afternoon. Cookies and Cream. Now, let us move on to number 4, Asheron's Call. And, I have to admit, I'm a little embarrassed to actually put this one on screen because, oh my gosh, this game has not aged well. Forget about it. What you're about to see is incredibly ugly graphically. It was ugly at the time. I mean, compared to EverQuest, which was its big competition. EverQuest came out, kind of introduced everybody to the concept of MUDs, but in this new 3D world where you're in control of every stuff, where you really feel like you're invested in the world. EverQuest changed lives. And to be fair, Jen and I, we played a ton of EverQuest before we eventually switched over to Asheron's Call. Asheron's Call was the ugly stepchild, and it's now largely forgotten. But what was so amazing about this game, I should have grabbed some more videos of it. I just grabbed one of these trailers. Every month, the developers behind Asheron's Call would put out a new event that would change the world, that would introduce new monsters, new quests, new dungeons, sometimes little changes, sometimes major changes. The world of Asheron's Call, Dareth, I think was the name of this world, was constantly, month after month after month, evolving. This is back when you had to pay monthly fees to get into your MMOs, and you got your money's worth out of there because the players were pulled into this world that was constantly changing. And we got to feel like we were changing the world because, and a brilliant thing about it too is this was not a case where, it was only high-level players who put in thousands of hours who, got to get into all the really cool event type stuff. The developers were smart. They would put stuff in that high-level players couldn't do, that low-level players like me, because I never really devoted that much time to this because I had work, I had a life. But even as a low-level player, I could feel like I was involved in these big epic quests when the equivalent of Voldemort would return and threaten to send the world into darkness, and somebody had to go and destroy his tower. Well, yeah, the big level guys, they went and took him on directly, but they couldn't have done it without us low level guys going in and doing stuff as well. And that, I don't believe any development team since then, before or after, has ever committed to such an ambitious schedule of constantly updating and evolving and changing the world. I mean, the very first event that ever happened, the game came out, we all got to play it for a month, and the first event was, hey, let's completely blanket the entire world in snow and introduce a whole bunch of new monsters that came out in the snow and reskin additional monsters. The day, I forget, I don't remember the name, was it Arwick? I remember they had an event where a meteor was going to strike, and it was going to completely wipe out a town, completely wipe out the face of the earth, and players got to choose, through like a vote, which it was. And so we all voted, and then when the event happened, and that town that we had all spent hours and hours and hours again was wiped from the planet. That had such huge, meaningful impact. But then on top of that, the big thing about this game, it was absolutely amazing because of this event system that they just kept on running month after month after month like clockwork. I really should have grabbed a longer teaser trailer for this. I didn't think I was going to talk this long. The gameplay itself did so many cool, amazing things. Like, the fact that if you were an archer or a wizard shooting stuff, you were shooting real projectiles. It was not hit scan weapons that were already decided where they were going to hit based on, they actually flew through the air. You could actually dodge incoming missiles in this game, which for an MMO was kind of unheard of at the time, and it's still very, very rare to this day. And there were so many cool, brilliant, outside the box things. One of the coolest things about this game was the way magic worked. In this world, the equivalent of the Force, there's this magical force that all the wizards, anybody who casts a spell, kind of weakens that magical force just a little bit every time they cast a spell. And when you start out playing the game, you don't know very many spells. You just have a bunch of components if you're a wizard, and you have to start experimenting, trying, let me try this spell combined with this component, and try, oh, fizzle. And the times I ran by wizard towers in town, and I would just run by, and I could hear them. I knew there were a dozen guys in there just tinkering and experimenting, trying to discover spells that they could cast. And the thing is, this wasn't a game where, oh, I discovered how to cast a new spell. I will tell everybody via the internet. You didn't want that, because the more people who knew the spell, the less powerful it was for you. So that was such a simple, brilliant little thing that created this real world where people did actual alchemical research. And if you were in a big guild, you would publish your findings. Other people would then be able to take your research and build on it. That was an amazing idea, so far ahead of its time. But it was just an amazing, amazing game. I had so much fun playing this, and I'm so in awe of what the developers were able to do with Asheron's Call. But now, let's move on out of the world of MMOs to my number 3, Left 4 Dead. Now, this is my only first-person shooter on the list, and I had, in my next podcast, I'll talk about all the games I didn't mention, like your Dooms, your Half-Lifes, your Portal, whatever. Left 4 Dead, though, in the very rich modern history of first-person shooters, I think Left 4 Dead is arguably the most important one that has ever been released because of the cool, interesting stuff it did with multiplayer and making multiplayer a more viable and exciting experience for non-hardcore players. Because, multiplayer's been around for a long time, but it's always been the domain of the hardcore player who's willing to devote their life. Because if they don't, you'll just get ripped apart right from the get-go. And it's very, very intimidating. Left 4 Dead threw all that on its head and created a cooperative first-person shooter where players are trying to survive, work together, with lots of really great cooperative mechanisms, trying to survive endless onslaughts of fast-running zombies. And it does so many cool, brilliant things. If one of your teammates dies, probably my favorite thing about the whole game, if one of your teammates dies, they're not out, or they're not permanently out. Instead, you'll just keep playing without them. And at some point, within the next couple of zones after you go through, you will find them. They have been captured. They're trapped inside a closet. You'll be able to go up and save them and bring them back into the game. That is such a rich and rewarding story that the game tells, that, this is a vehicle for players to tell their own stories. And that's always been the strength of multiplayer gaming. Over 99% of all video games are solitary experiences, and where you experience a story that a designer has created for you. Multiplayer is so much more rich and meaningful because it is a platform for players to work together to create their own interesting stories that have so much more meaning and depth because they weren't predefined by somebody like me. And this is a game that made it so much easier for people to get into and devote themselves to online multiplayer gaming. I mean, never mind the fact that it's actually a brilliantly designed game too. The tension and the horror as you're moving and the zombies are coming. You can hear them. You don't know where they're coming from. And then all of a sudden, somebody fires off a gun or you do a car alarm and then they just descend on you. Sheer raw panic. But of course, everybody, because so many of us played this with our brand new Xbox 360 headphones, we're screaming at each other, come back, help me, cover me, all this kind of stuff. You felt like you were there. It pulled you in such a way. And it's not that other games hadn't done this first, but this game really took it to the next level and made it so attractive and inviting. It pulled this was not a game that keeps newbies at arm's length. This game brings newbies in because players can help each other in so many cool and interesting ways. And then also, if that wasn't enough, once you're into it, you can actually start playing player versus player, where you can continue to just be one of the humans, this group of 4 humans trying to survive, get through this nightmare zombie apocalypse, or you can play as the zombies. And that entire system of team versus team was so brilliantly done. This asymmetry between the ways that the human players played versus the super zombie, the infected players played, created so much depth. And again, even better, deeper, richer opportunities for player storytelling that, I mean, it stands alone. I mean, this is an incredible milestone. I personally took so much inspiration from this in my own game development days. I think it's a really, really important evolution. This is just as big as, there's Doom, which, obviously Wolfenstein came before, but Doom is really, and there were a few others, but Doom is the one that really kind of made first-person shooters what they are today. Everything owes itself to Doom. And then you've got whatever it is, 10, 12 years, and then you've got this. This is the next big evolution. Half-Life, yeah, it was nice. GoldenEye, yeah, that was cool. There was some interesting stuff, but nothing was as important. A Battlefield 1942, there are a lot of important steps along the way, but this is the one, oops, man, I talked longer than I thought I was going to, that really took it to the next level, that really changed the game forever. Man, I can't tell you how much fun me and my coworkers, I mostly played this with guys at Lionhead when I was working on Fable 2. And, every night we'd go home and we'd just play this for hours. Our poor wives and girlfriends and families couldn't get to sleep because we were just downstairs in the basement screaming, "Get back here, what are you doing?" Oh man, nothing. Almost nothing. But again, I'm not talking about my own games. I'll save that for, maybe I'll talk a bit about that in the podcast. But anyway, so that was number 3, Left 4 Dead. Oh my gosh, so many memories. Now, moving on to number 2, Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. This game is the epitome of adventure. Nobody has done it better before or since. And again, and in all honesty, this is maybe one of 2D gaming's last big hurrahs before Super Mario World came out and changed everything. I'm just going to come right out and say it right now. Video games are better in 2D than 3D. They just are. And that is a simple function of the mechanism that we have that we can use to interact with the world. And again, everything I'm talking about here is not PC-centric. This is almost entirely console-centric. The fact that I'm holding this controller in my hand, effectively a two-dimensional device that I'm manipulating, works so much better to manipulate a two-dimensional space. Taking game controllers and trying to, it works. Obviously, we owe a big, Call of Duty 2, a huge milestone game in and of itself. Big deal. So innovative in that game. But more than anything else, introduced us to what is now the standard first-person shooter controls. Hey, I give it to them. They deserve it. Kudos to them. Yeah, Turok invented it, but Call of Duty codified it. But 2D gaming, I still think, is always inherently superior to 3D. Usually the best 3D gaming is gaming that's still effectively two-dimensional, like Doom, when it boils right down to it. But man, this game, such a deep, rich, evocative world. You spent hours running around in Hyrule, the light side and the dark side. These dungeons you were exploring were so deliciously clever and fiendish, but still never impossible to figure out. When you eventually figure it out, I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? That one simple little thing. So much creativity and innovation went into the design of this game. Never mind, probably the best video game opener in history. The ubiquitous, it was a dark and stormy night. You're a little kid, you wake up, you wonder, where is your father gone? You boldly go out into the night to try to find him, and then from there you get pulled into this epic adventure that will ultimately lead to you saving the world. Oh man, it's just so wonderful. And of course, Nintendo and Capcom have revisited this well time after time after time, but none of them compare to this. This is still the high water mark. Oh man, I love it so much. But even still, it's not my number 1 of all time, and people are going to think my number 1 is very, very strange. Fair warning, you guys are going to... Don't drink any water right now because you'll end up doing a spit take. Here's my number 1, Elite Beat Agents. Which probably deserves some explanation. Well, first of all, probably a lot of people don't even know what this is. Never even heard of it. It was a little Nintendo DS game, dual screen, so you have the top and the bottom screen. In this game, players are cast in the role of effectively guardian angels. You're part of the elite beat squad or something like that. A bunch of government guys, men in black basically, who come out and help people when they need help. And that's all you do. And I mean, the gamut of people you help and the problems you solve in this game run from the mundane. Like the very first level of this game is helping a teenage girl try to babysit and keep these unruly kids under control, to really big epic things like helping a down and out baseball player fight Godzilla, and or helping a couple of girls escape from a deserted island, or helping a movie director try to get his movie in on time and on budget. So there's all these really interesting scenarios, but at the core of it, the thing that we love so much about it, that I love so much about it, is that you're helping people. This is a game unlike every other game I have talked about, with the exception of maybe the first one. Every other game is all about killing, running around, killing things, destroying things, fighting. This is the exact opposite. This is a game where you are helping people, where you are healing people, just so the theme alone pulls it in so much, and it's such a breath of fresh air when it came out. The gameplay itself it's a music game. It's a beat rhythm game, and I have to say I've always loved these. I love the rock bands and the guitar heroes and the Dance Dance Revolutions. I used to have a Dance Dance Revolution mat, and Jen would just laugh at me endlessly, but I didn't care. I was having so much fun. And and this one, on a certain level, can never be quite as immersive, because you're just tapping, in time to the music and doing drags and stuff like that on, the touch screen. But the designs of these little kind of visual tap puzzles that you had to solve in real time and try to keep up with the beat, they were really nicely done. And they were so wonderfully integrated into the beat and the timing of the songs that played that, even though I was just tapping a screen with a stylus, I kind of felt like I was making the music, like I was singing the song. It was so nicely designed. And so, I love music games, and so this is definitely my favorite because it works so well. Oh, we're about to the end of this particular one. Let's go ahead and rewind a little bit. So the gameplay was great, and I have not finished this at the highest levels when the men in black are replaced with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, basically at the super high difficulty level. That's too much for me, but I did finish at all the other difficulty levels, and I loved it so much every step of the way. The challenge just increases. The music is phenomenal. All the songs they chose for this, even ones I didn't like before I played this game, I love them now because I feel like I've played them. I feel like I know them so well. I feel like they're a part of me because I've spent so much time playing it. But the thing that probably got me more than anything else and puts this game on this list is this particular mission that's running in the background right now. Because like I said, for the most parts, the missions were just kind of silly, weird, wacky situations. But then about halfway through the game, and if I recall correctly, I think there's like 18 missions, maybe 16, 15, somewhere in the high teens. Halfway through the game, you're just doing all these wacky things, playing a lot of, really upbeat pop rock songs. But then this mission comes along, and it's a gut punch. In this mission, you are helping a little girl whose father has died and who can't get over the death of her father. And you're doing Patrick Swayze ghost stuff. You are the ghost of the father trying to help your daughter and your wife move on and try to find happiness in their life again. And it's done to that old Chicago song, You're My Inspiration, which is a song I don't particularly care about at all. Never, always thought it was very soft and schmaltzy and silly. But when I download this video, I was actually looking at the comments because I was thinking back to when I played it the first time and how I was literally playing through tears. It was so moving. And I saw so many people saying the same thing. It was so hard to play through the tears when they played this. There have been a lot of video games over the years that have really gotten me on an emotional level, that have really brought me in and, have really got me swept up. And I've cried over video games before, but nothing like this one. It was such a simple, pure, beautiful story that was told of, and I so want to succeed. The stakes in this little mission are so much more deep and rich and meaningful and, important than any game where it's my job to save the world or the universe or the president or whatever. All those kind of standard tropes pale in comparison to the impact that this game has of this little girl just trying to remember her father and me trying to cheerlead her through this incredibly tough time. And that's what puts this at my number one. Never mind the fact that it's so much fun, particularly if you love music games. And it's just, the gameplay itself is very, very rich and simple. It does a lot with a little. You really feel like you're connected to the songs, even though you're just playing with a stylus. But the fun stories, whether they're, heartwarming or heart-wrenching or just silly, and the music. I mean, I still have a lot of the music from this, on my regular MP3 rotation on my iPhone. I'll never stop playing those songs because this game was so impactful. And that's it, folks. That is my number one video game of all time, Elite Beat Agents. Kind of a weird eclectic mix, I know, but I'll probably do a follow-up on this in my next podcast coming at the end of the month because I have a whole bunch of top 10s I need to talk about, and people have asked questions, but what about this? What about this? What about this? So if you have questions, what about X, Y, or Z? How could you possibly ignore this? Or have you heard of that or whatever? By all means, let me know, and I'll address those things in the next podcast, which you can always find my podcast at podcast.rahdo.com. And that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. And for my normal viewers, thanks for your patience. Hope you made it through this. I know you want me to get back to the board games. They're right over there. Don't worry. I'll be getting back to the board games tomorrow. But it was kind of nice. I had a really good time going through memory lane thinking. And so many games I wanted to put on this list. But, 10. It's hard. And that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.